Okay. Anybody who said yes, if you would like to unmute yourself, come on and tell us a little bit about what that looked like.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, it's been a few years since I've used it. I think the principal has been the one administering the performance checklist for the last several years, but it was pretty decent from what I recall. It was fairly specific regarding interactions with children, and it was basically like a rating scale, from 1 to 5, 5 being the best, one needing improvement. But I honestly do not remember the details. It's been several years since I've been the one who was supposed to use it.
Okay. Your sounds a little like an evaluation, but yeah,
Yeah, it was more. It was probably more of an evaluation than a performance checklist, honestly.
which they can be very similar. They can basically they should have the exact same things. Whatever you're telling the staff that they're supposed to do is what they should be evaluated on. So that's good. Awesome. Anybody else?
Mine was basically going over all the checking on how we did our programming
Okay.
and our evaluation. We have supervisors that come in every month or every other month and come in during a session and just evaluate if we're doing what the consultant wants in the programming and during the session.
Okay, great. And were you given a list of those things that you were being evaluated on?
After the fact.
After the fact. Okay.
Yes.
So no, that's a good example because I think that a lot of places do that and a lot of supervisors do that. But really the best way to do this, and the reason why we bring up performance checklist in this stage, because the last step is evaluating, but the reason we bring this up here is because the best way to get people to do what you want them to do is to give it to them up front and then evaluate them on the exact same thing.
Yeah. But because we do have, each client usually have a session structure and exactly what the consultant wants you to do during the session. And so we kind of have, I guess, like a checklist. We know what we need to do during the session and things like that. So basically, every other month a supervisor will come in and see if we are doing what the consultant had planned out for us.
Great. Let's see. I've had some jobs where I've come in as a supervisor, actually maybe only one, where they actually did have a checklist of things that were the supervisor's responsibility. I probably do have one that I've made for one of my companies, Vanessa. Let me see if I can find it, and if I can find a good example, I will email it to all of you guys. If not, I'll make one, and I'll email it to all of you guys. But yeah, I've had one as a supervisor where it said what the supervisor duties are and what we were supposed to complete each month. Actually, I've worked a couple places like that, and one of the places actually, they gave us that checklist, and then each month they would score us on everything and give us a percentage. So there's multiple ones, like we had a report writing checklist, so everything that when we were submitting a report, everything listed that we needed to make sure was in that report, and then when somebody would review the reports, those were exactly the things that they were looking on, and they would score us on each thing, just whether or not we did it, whether or not it was there. And then we would get a percentage at the end of each month for all of our reports due that month combined. And it was like that with everything that we were supposed to be doing. So it was things that were very objective. So whether or not we turned in signed team meeting notes, looking at our schedule, whether or not we met our billable hours, things like that. So kind of having those types of checklists. I think that companies are better at doing that for supervisors and what they're supposed to be doing. And then it's a little less with the direct staff. My guess is that it's because each supervisor should be doing that and making it very specific to each client, kind of like Lynette was talking about. This is a little different from staff training, but okay, let me read Vanessa's. There are 4 components we had to have in our daily reports after providing in-home therapy. So would that be kind of the same thing? Yeah, that would be one type of performance checklist. That would be a performance checklist for writing your daily reports or writing your session notes. Another example is for like training staff. If you have a performance checklist. So let's say you want to you're training them on how to implement a behavior intervention plan. When we write up behavior intervention plans, we have all those different steps, all those different things that they should be doing. Are they reinforcing replacement behaviors? Are they using the various antecedent strategies? And those should be specifically laid out in a checklist on which antecedent strategies they should be using. Are they using extinction or using the correct consequence strategies? Are they collecting data on the problem behavior? So those things can be listed out. Basically taking a behavior intervention plan and just turning that into a checklist of all the things that they should be doing. And then when you go in, you can see, are they doing all of these steps, and just check it off. That can also be called fidelity or treatment integrity, and making sure that plans are being implemented appropriately. Okay. So the purpose of providing a performance checklist or a work activity schedule would be that it brings clarity. Everybody knows exactly what they're supposed to be doing, makes things transparent. It also is really helpful when you have substitutes, staff filling in, or having staff doing other responsibilities than what they typically do on a day-to-day basis. Because we want to make sure if somebody is subbing, somebody's filling in, that they are still doing the exact same procedures, protocols that the other staff is doing. And when you are writing up a performance checklist or a work activity schedule, it helps you really know exactly what you're asking for, and it helps you identify if what you're asking for is feasible. Has anybody been given kind of a list of expectations that were just impossible? It wasn't possible for you to do them all? Yes, I think we probably have that a lot in our field, especially when you become a BCBA and become in that supervisory position. That we have a lot of expectations, and sometimes it's important for the people above to really recognize what is possible and what is not. I think as a supervisor at BCBA, one of those big things is billable hours, and a lot of us work with kids in home, and so they're only available after school. And one of the things on our checklist might be to meet a certain amount of billable hours, but all of the kids we're given can only be seen from 3 to 6. So that kind of makes one of those things on the checklist impossible. But being in that position and writing that out helps you recognize those things, so that even if somebody's giving you that responsibility, you can kind of have that insight for when you're in that position and you're writing out a checklist for somebody. Or even the work activity schedule is more of a step-by-step of almost like a task analysis for a day, or or almost like a to-do list. And especially if you do it kind of like hour by hour, this is what you're supposed to be doing, that really would help to see whether or not you can actually see clients as much as some companies expect you to. All right, the last point from step number 2 is making sure that we get buy-in from staff. So when we're coming up with the development of goals, when we're coming up with the definitions of things, we want to involve staff in that process. The people that you're supervising should be involved in that process. We want to always make sure that we're getting their feedback. The reason being, we don't want to spend all this time developing all the definitions and goals and expectations and then have no staff buy-in. So while it's important, like the supervisor is kind of in charge and has the final say and knows exactly what it is that needs to be done. If it doesn't really matter if we come up with this list of things and then nobody agrees with it. So we want to make sure that we get their input and get their buy-in. All right. It is tough sometimes. Do you have an example? Or a situation that anybody have an example or a situation that you've been in where getting that buy-in was difficult?
I do. I have, I work in public school, and I have 3 paras in my room, and we did the procedural fidelity checklist after they read their job description and they sign it at the bottom for the school, and then they come in and they really aren't doing it. So then we started the procedural fidelity so that their job description and things that were expected of them are right there. This is what I need to do every single day. And then we send it at the end of the week. But specifically one of my paras in my classroom just does not care. If it's a verbal operant and it's learning what a MAND is, even though we talk about MANDs and it's semester 2, he has no care. He has no buy-in. We have a meeting, and it's very frustrating because, like Christy says, changing adult behavior is very hard if you don't care. And a lot of the times he says to me, well, I get paid $1,500 a month. I really don't care. I'm not working that hard. So yes, it is sometimes hard to get the buy-in and to have that extra training with them when they really don't care.
Absolutely. I think that in those types of situations, it's tough too when, even though we're typically in supervisory positions, we're in supervisory positions where we don't fully get control. There's still people above us that make decisions on other things. In some work situations, the supervisor does get a say in who's hired, and in others, we have no say in who's hired. We just have to kind of work with whoever is sent. And so that definitely makes it difficult. But going through all of the steps, I think really helps. So when you have somebody who is, if we go back to step 1 and what's the mission, and really having everybody understand and know and agree with the mission, that's definitely helpful. And then if you have somebody who doesn't, that can definitely hinder all the rest of the steps. But also, I think sometimes we have to think of it in the same way as we would a client who is not motivated to do something that we want them to do. So really being able to find what's reinforcing to them and what would motivate them. So it's definitely a different situation because you don't get to control their paycheck. They're still going to get their paycheck, probably no matter what they do. But documentation and being able to take data on what they're doing is also helpful sometimes, especially when you have people to answer to, and if you have somebody who is maybe not making improvements, and you kind of get in that situation that you were describing, having that documentation of what you're providing with them, and not seeing the increase in performance is something that you can then report to like HR or whoever your supervisor is. Let's see. Kathy says the school districts have too many layers of rules that make it difficult to replace poor performing staff. Community employers have more room in that area, but struggle with finding qualified staff. I've seen agencies keep around poor performing staff because they cannot find certified staff and have clients on wait lists for services. Absolutely, definitely. That's very true. I think that that's what makes this topic really important. It's not going to work 100% of the time. There are still people who, especially since we don't 100% control the motivation and the reinforcers that they're getting. Like I said, they're probably still going to get a paycheck, where our hands are going to be tied a little bit. But following these steps is what we can do, and it really does make a difference. Not only is this book about making sure that people get trained to proficiency, but it also talks a lot about making the supervision experience a positive one, and how following all these steps can really help improve the morale and the relationship between a supervisor and supervisee. So hopefully some of this stuff you'll be able to take away and maybe try in some of these difficult situations, and hopefully have it help. But yeah, sometimes we have to be creative because we don't control the biggest motivation, the paycheck. But sometimes you are able to find other forms of motivation. Okay, I want to move on a little bit because I want to get into the book, or probably the most important part of this training, and that's how to actually train staff in performance skills. So this book refers to it as competency-based training. You'll also hear in the ABA field behavior skills training. They're very similar. The steps are the smallest bit different, but it's just that this one kind of breaks it down a little bit more than behavior skills training. But we're going to kind of go over the steps. But one of the reasons that this type of training and using all of these steps is important is because learning how to do something and actually doing it are different skills. I listened to somebody speak on this, and they mentioned how you can go to a lecture, you can learn all about something, you can then go take a test and pass it, and based on taking that test, you might get a certificate that says you are now proficient in, maybe you learned about DTT or incidental teaching or any variety of topics. But you never actually done it. You just kind of heard about it or read about it and were able to answer questions about it. But actually going out and doing it is a very different skill. So we want this type of training, make sure that we cover not only understanding what it is, but how to do it. Okay, so we're gonna do an activity real quick. If everybody could, and this will require you guys, if you have video, to turn on your video just so we can all see what everybody's final product is. So everybody get a piece of paper. I'll give you a minute to grab a piece of paper and a pen before we start. think I only see one video turned on so far. Oh, okay, we got 2. Here's 3. Missing 3 people, I believe. All right, not everybody might have video access. That's okay, as long as we have some people. But if you could type in, does everybody have a piece of paper ready to do the activity?
Shari, I have a question.
Sure.
Is this line, is it horizontal? Oh, no, it has to be diagonal. Just kidding. Just kidding.
No problem. Okay. All right. So I'm going to read it, but you guys can see it as well, so you can try to follow along. All right. So get a piece of paper. Fold your paper in half, and then open it back up. And then you're going to draw a line from one corner to the other. Then on the left side, you're going to draw a circle in the center. And on the right side, you're going to draw a letter A at the top of the section. And when you are done, go ahead and hold that up to your video camera so we can see what they look like. All right, so I can kind of see 2 right now, and they are different. Yep, okay. So almost every single one of them is different. So that was the point of this exercise. I intentionally made the instructions vague and did not model for you to show the importance of having very clear instructions and showing exactly what we want. Because this is, even though this is a totally just like random activity, I see, if I translate this to maybe a skill acquisition protocol that I go out and see, I see instructions like this all the time where it's kind of vague. It doesn't tell you exactly what to do, and just that sheet alone, without anybody to answer questions, without anybody to model, can result in our staff doing things a whole bunch of different ways. All right, so let's talk about what the steps are for competency-based training. So numbers 1 and 2 describe the skill and give a written description. If any of you have heard of behavior skills training, a lot of times those 2 will be put into one step. In this version, it's split into 2, and they think it's important to do both, whereas behavior skills training kind of says you can do one or the other. I think it's good to do both just because people learn differently. So some people will learn better if you tell them how to do it, and some people need that visual. It's always good to have the visual because then they can always refer back to it as well. I also was listening to somebody speak about this, and they mentioned another reason to have that written description is for people who maybe whatever language that you're teaching in might not be their first language. So hearing it, they might pick up some of it, but then being able to really go back and read through it and do it at their pace can be really helpful. So when we describe the skill, we want to describe exactly what behaviors they're going to do, going back to making sure those behaviors are clearly defined. So it's perfectly clear exactly what they're supposed to do. And a lot of times you want to include why. Why are we working on this skill? Why are we teaching this skill? And that kind of goes back to the buy-in. Again, it's not going to work 100% of the time, but if you've got people who really believe in the same mission as you, they're wanting to learn, sometimes it helps their buy-in and helps them to be able to be motivated to do those behaviors if they know why we're teaching that skill. And then you can give a written description, and this is going back to something similar to the performance checklist, or it can be like a task analysis. So you have it written out step by step exactly what they're supposed to do. The next step is to demonstrate the skill the way you want them to perform it. So after you've told them how to do it, you're going to jump in and model and show them how to do it. And so this can be in either if you're actually out in the field working with a client, then you would actually work with the client and show them what you want them to do. Or if the client's not there, this could be a role play situation. But in some way, you have to model it for them. You can also use video modeling, which sometimes is even better because then you know that they are seeing you do it exactly the same way every single time, so there's no variation. Each person that you train is seeing the exact same thing. So if you have to train a bunch of people on the same thing, it might be good to videotape yourself performing that skill so that they can see exactly how you want them to do it. After you have shown them how to do it, then you're going to have them practice the target skill while you provide feedback. We're going to talk a little bit more about that next. And then you want to repeat those steps, mostly the modeling, having them practice and providing feedback, but also sometimes going back to describing until the staff is competent in the skill. So just like we would have a mastery criteria or a goal for our clients in learning a skill, we want to make sure we have that criteria set for our staff as well. They need to be performing it at whatever your criteria is going to be. And that's how you'll know that they are competent in performing that skill. Questions so far? Okay. Some of the, I've seen a lot of supervisors, and I think one of the biggest mistakes or most common mistakes that I see is that the step, demonstrate the skill the way you want them to perform it, or modeling the skill, is the step that gets skipped a lot. And it's probably one of the most important steps. Even going back to BuyIn again, we want our staff to know that we can do what we're asking them to do. They want to be able to see that we can do what we're asking them to do. I too many times see supervisors kind of just stepping back and only always talking to their staff, when it's much more useful and efficient for them to be able to jump in, show them real quick, and then make sure that they get the chance to try the skill as well. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. People tend to buy in when they know the trainer is competent. And I think people just, they like to see their supervisors, and they like to see that you've done the same position as them, that you've been in their shoes, that you know what they're going through, and taking that chance to work directly with a client and model a skill helps show them that. All right. So feedback. I will probably do more on feedback. I just wanted to give a brief overview on it, but I'll probably do more on feedback in our next group supervision, which mine isn't until March, but the next time you guys have a chance to see me, I will probably do a second part to supervision. So some of the important things about feedback is that it should be provided in the moment and immediately. For the most part, it research show that it's more effective if it's in the moment and immediately. There are certain times where maybe it's not appropriate to give it immediately. Can anybody think of times where maybe you might wait a little longer before providing feedback?
Some people don't like public praise, and if they're in front of other people, it might be best to do your feedback or your praise or your constructive criticism in private rather than in front of an audience.
Perfect. Yes. Okay, so we have during a therapy session, it can be distracting to the client. That could be a situation in some cases. If something went horribly wrong, yes, especially putting that with the public aspect. If there's other people who would hear it and something went horribly wrong, you might not want to point that out in front of everyone. Also, going along with the public thing, sometimes with parents, sometimes giving too much feedback to a staff, even if they're new and you know it's important and they need it, sometimes giving too much in front of a parent to a staff decreases that parent's confidence level in that staff and can affect the relationship in the future. So sometimes you just want to be aware of those situations and when it's not to give certain types of feedback. You can almost always give the positive feedback in the moment. Sometimes it's the corrective feedback that, depending on what it is, you may or may not need to wait on it. But it still should be as immediately as possible. So if this was during I know some of you guys work in school, so maybe you're just waiting till the next break or until recess, or if it is during a in-home therapy session, you just wait till the end of the session and you would talk to them immediately after, once you're outside of the home. Something that I heard discussed and also that I like to do is I like to tell people, especially when they're new, that there's going to be a lot of corrective feedback. I'm also going to try to find everything right that they're doing, but I expect them to make mistakes at the beginning because it's a brand new skill and they're learning, and that's okay. And the purpose of us giving the corrective feedback is to help them improve and get them to competency as quickly as possible, and not in any way to try to put them down or try to point out what they're doing wrong, but to get them to that competency level as quickly as possible. And a lot of times, just kind of priming somebody with that will help your relationship and help them understand why they're getting so much feedback in the beginning. Especially if you are in an initial training, if you are kind of in an office setting where you're able to do that role play and do all these steps without the client, then it's good to just give that a lot of immediate feedback so that they can make those changes as fast as possible. In the field, I still prime them, especially if somebody is new to me. I'm a new supervisor to them. I'll let them know, this is something that I'm going to do, because to be perfectly honest, not all supervisors follow all these steps. And so sometimes when I come in and I am using all these steps, it's different for them. And so I like to let people know exactly what I'm doing, why I'm giving feedback immediately. I've had some people I've worked with who never got immediate feedback. Their supervisor always waited till later. And so getting that immediate feedback was weird to them. And so just kind of giving them that information beforehand. And then the last thing about feedback is that I've heard a whole bunch of different ratios of positive to negative or positive to corrective, but there should be a much higher ratio of letting them know what they're doing right compared to what they're doing wrong. So I've heard anywhere from 4-to-1 to 12-to-1, and anywhere in between. But as long as you make sure there's more positive than there is corrective. I always ask for feedback if I do not get it right away. Yeah, feedback's definitely important, and I've had a lot of supervisors like that too, which is awesome. It's awesome when people want that feedback. Okay, let's see. We're almost out of time. I wanted to do a quick activity. You guys are going to look out because I was going to ask somebody if they wanted to teach, but I will just do it because I was going to do it first and then I was going to have one of you guys do it, but we only have 4 minutes left, so we'll probably only get through one. Okay, so this time, this activity, I'm going to make sure we do all of the steps. So don't start doing it yet. So first I'm going to tell you, we are going to draw a flower. These steps are, and you have them written for you, that first in the center of the paper, you're going to draw a 1-inch circle. And I'm going to do it step by step. So I'm going to actually draw it a little bit bigger than 1 inch just to make sure that you can see it. But there's my 1-inch circle in the center of the paper. Oh, I don't know how I did that. I apologize for this red line that's going through it. I don't even know how that happened. How I just did that. I'm going to do it. I'm not sure. Okay, second step is to draw another circle inside the first circle about 1 centimeter smaller. So here is my second circle inside. Next step is to draw 4 long oval-shaped petals at the top, bottom, left, and right of the circle. Here's my first one on the top. I'm going to draw the rest of them. So this is what it should look like after the third step. And then the last step is to draw 4 more long oval-shaped petals at each of the 4 diagonal corners. So this is what it should look like when we are complete. All right. Trying to see some of them I can't quite see. Awesome. Okay, great. All of your flowers that I could see looked good. This is a pretty simple exercise, so my feedback is all positive. I didn't see anybody who did it differently. And so all our flowers look the same this time because we had clear instruction, clear teaching, and you got to see exactly what I was looking for. So the last thing I had on here was that I was going to have somebody else try teaching something simple like that, but I don't think we're going to have enough time for that. Okay, just with the last minute, any questions, comments? Okay, I'm just making sure I got everyone signed in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, 8 people. Okay. All right. Yes, it is. Let me make sure I say it right again. I don't want to tell you the wrong thing. It is the Supervisor's Guidebook. I'll type it in here. Let me find the exact reference. I know it's Reed and Parsons, but I want to make sure I'm not missing any authors. There's also a 3-part podcast that goes over the information in this book if anybody's interested. The podcast is ABA Inside Track. And I think the topic was just they have supervision part 1, 2, and 3. And they go over information from the book as well. All right. Well, I hope everybody has a happy new year and hope to see you guys all again. I think my next one's beginning of March. All right. Thanks, guys.